Welcome to episode 17 of the Sport Marketeer. As always, it's in collaboration with, oh, my bad. Welcome to episode 17 of the White Whale Marketing Podcast. It's in collaboration with the Sport Marketeer. Little mess up there. The Sport Marketeer is a newsletter that we created at White Whale Marketing for you to be up to date with all the latest news, ideas, thoughts in sports marketing. So check it out. It comes out every Friday in newsletter form, gets sent directly to your inbox, or you can find it on our Substack. You can see the link in the bio for YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, and you can subscribe there so you can always be up to date. Maybe you'll sound a little smarter, this week in the boardroom. So check it out. And today I'm joined with Haral. So shout out Haral for joining us. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And as always, we have 3 topics to cover that will be discussed in tomorrow's issue of the Sport Marketeer. The 3 today being Strava, so the wearable fitness technology and how brands can utilize them. The second being why aren't more sporting brands and athletes using short form content like TikTok, Reels, and YouTube Shorts, right? That's everywhere now. And last but not least, MLS Next, this new program that the MLS is launching to develop North American talent. With that, let's get to topic number 1. Topic number 1 is, AJ's topic. He's not here today due to exam, so good luck with that. But his topic is Strava. So as I mentioned, Strava is this wearable fitness technology where people can kind of interact and, kind of trace their routes within whether they're biking, walking, whatever, and you can actually kind of make like a graphic or lettering or even design if you're good enough to do so. And with that, in 2021, it was reported that 1.8 billion activities were used on Strava. So it's been a great way for people to collaborate, connect, etc. And brands such as Adidas have even created partnerships with Strava to do activations. So with that, the question that's here today for this topic, it's going to be on tomorrow's newsletter, is how can brands best utilize a partnership with Strava in the future? And just to piggyback off that, which brands would you suggest be like, hey, this type of brand, whether it's a team, an apparel company, whatever, who do you think should be partnering with Strava?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 ways we can look at the effectiveness of Strava. One is how brands can engage with it in order to appeal to the mass consumer. And then we can also apply it to how Strava and the technology of it is important for athletes, both on the branding side and for the athletic development. I think we'll talk more about the first one, though, where you're looking at how Strava as a platform can be used by companies just to target the general audience. Fun fact, actually, I remember earlier this summer, Chris and I actually had a couple of ideas on how some brands could use Strava and working in some partnerships with some athletes.
I forgot.
So yeah, some of those secrets are not going to get exposed on this podcast. You'll have to get in direct contact with us to know about that. But ultimately, I think Strava is the best fitness social media platform that I think currently exists. Like I've had friends talk to each other about like, oh, I saw your thing on Strava. I saw your run on Strava. Like, oh, you did this on Strava. You can share pictures of your run or your hike on Strava as well. So it's about taking the behavior of people being on social media and using Strava as a social media platform. And that's how I believe brands can best tap in to a market like that. So whether it's encouraging people to use Strava more in partnership with it, or brands doing something viral, like, hey, if some guy went on a bike ride or something and he spelled out a brand's name on his route, that's one of the ways you can take Strava and not only go viral on Strava, but then take that to like Facebook, to Twitter, and then being like, oh, like this guy loves us so much, he spelled out, let me think of a very easy name here. Yeah, Saskatchewan Roughriders. That's definitely so easy to spell. But imagine someone biking out Saskatchewan Roughriders and then putting it up on Strava, and then the Saskatchewan Roughriders using that to show their fandom. It's a good way to engage with fans. That's an extreme example, but essentially I think it's all about trying to get people who use it regularly to understand and try to think of your brand when it comes up with it, because a lot of brands don't integrate with Strava now. So when you're on Strava, you don't really immediately think of any brand. So it's almost like a first mover's advantage at the moment if a company actually goes through with a partnership on Strava.
Yeah, no, and there's like a bunch of different things, like just piggybacking off what you're saying, right? Where, whether it's let's use like Adidas as an example, where a company like Adidas, Nike, Puma, etc., like those fitness apparel companies, they can basically almost like create like activations or partnerships where it's like, hey, write out or create this design, right? Whether for Nike it's this specific like Kyrie or Kitty's logo or something like that, using the athletes as well. And, everyone has to create the logo, and then you take a cool picture, wearing your favorite line of apparel from KD, Kyrie, whoever. So there's like cool different things like that. But at the same time, it's still like pushing your values, right? Of health and fitness, making sure people are staying active. So it does align well rather than sometimes brands are like, hey, let's, I don't know, do a gaming stream, right? But then they're all about health and fitness. How does that line up where people have to be, sedentary at their desk playing a video game in front of a screen, but then they're trying to push a lifestyle of fitness, right? So then it doesn't align. Whereas doing activations with a fitness wearable like Strava, it's pretty cool, right? So definitely creative. I haven't seen it as much, and one thing that I think AJ's talking about in tomorrow's article as well is this just a COVID thing, right? I think that's a big thing where Strava kind of blew up. Where what could you do? I know all I did was during COVID, like in the midst of the lockdowns at the beginning, I'd go on walks for 3 hours and just have calls and like call some friends, call some people for networking, whatever. And that's all I did. And I think other people did the same thing, but they just happened to do designs while I just walked. So who knows where it goes.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the interesting thing I thought of just now is because I went to Western University and I know a couple people who graduated from there. They currently work for Lululemon, one of the retail locations in London specifically, and so they actually have a run club that they have. So I guess every night or a couple weeknights a week, they just do runs. I guess they maybe start at their store, they have a route or something, and then they encourage just members of the general public to join them as like a fitness activity. Like it's a run
Yeah.
club. It's not necessarily sponsored by Lululemon, but it's called the Lululemon Masonville Run Club because Masonville is the mall in London where the Lululemon's at. Anyways, I was thinking, like, if you encourage people, like a brand like Lululemon, if they create a run club, they get people to join them. And then, people start posting it on Strava. They encourage, like, hey, post this on Strava to get like 10% off at our store or something like that for a one time purchase. Eventually, you're going to start seeing people on Strava, like their friends scrolling through and just being like, oh, this person went on a 5K run. What's this Lululemon Run Club? And
Yeah.
that's what I feel like might be a natural way for a brand to create that positive behavior and just, I guess, generate that brand recognition within the app. Like, not necessarily creating sponsored events, but having your brand name tied to an event or tied to an activity that someone's regularly doing so that it appears regularly on someone's Strava. And then for people following that person or friends with that person are regularly going to see it on their fitness apps as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's definitely smart. I know like brands like there's a running store just across the street from me, and they have like a running club as well. But then that's like what you're saying is kind of taking it to the next step. And then with that, I'm going to take it to the next step because it just gave me an idea. Where let's think about marathons, right? And we're in the business of athlete marketing, sponsorships, etc. Right? We're in sports marketing. So what if a marathon, right? There's a bunch of marathons, almost every major city. A lot of charities have runs as well to kind of raise funds. And obviously you have your different partners that are available there, right? You usually have your gold, your bronze, etc. What if you have, rather than a presenting sponsor, you have, I don't know, what would the term be? I don't know. Your eye in the sky sponsor. Let's go with that. Okay, because we're talking about Strava. What if you make the route of the marathon a specific brand's logo?
Yeah.
Right? And that, let's say it's like TD Bank, right? So then maybe you have people run 5 kilometers up, two this way, complete the TDBANK. And then maybe there's a little fun prize as well where the person who runs the cleanest TD Bank logo, gets something from TD, right? Whereas maybe it's like another activation where it's actually something creative and experiential where, yeah, you're competing and you're raising money for this marathon. But there's also something fun as well where it's actually giving, TD something that they can actually utilize rather than just a piece of signage.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe even so doing something live like that where, let's say let's just say for hypothetical sake that like people aren't or another way to do that is having people just run a regular 5K, and if you have 50 people running, you get the amount of kilometers there, and then you would be like, well, that we ran just so many kilometers, we could spell TD Bank across Ontario. Or if you get
Yeah.
like 100,000 people participating, we just like if we like hypothetically like stretched out all of our kilometers, we just spelled TD across North America or something like that. And that's another fun way to potentially use that. This one is more of like an idea of using what Strava's model is and just applying it into a brand activation as opposed to directly using Strava though. But I
Yeah.
think it goes both ways, right? Once people start to adopt Strava and understand how it works and what it's used for, you don't necessarily even have to use the app, right? You can just use the Strava template and then put that into your marketing or put that into your branding or any sort of kind of promotional piece of content you're creating, and people understand what it is. Whereas right now, people won't necessarily link it to Strava just yet, but as it continues to gain popularity, I believe there's like 1.8 billion
Active.
engagements or uses of the app. As people start to use it more, and depending on which demographics and which markets you're targeting, people will see something and just be like, "Oh, yeah, that's a Strava thing," as opposed to, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's just a running thing."
Yeah, no, I was just thinking in regards to maybe like marathons partnering with Strava and then using them as like a sponsorship platform almost, or like some to present their sponsorships where even though Facebook, Instagram, whatever are obviously like companies and brands, people then still create partnerships away from them and then just kind of post them on those platforms. But yeah, no, definitely interesting. But who knows? Maybe we've got to keep these ideas, and White Whale Marketing one day will have a marathon for charity or something like that, and we'll make some fun logos. Run a beluga whale around
Yeah,
the city.
I'll start practicing now then. If that's
Yeah,
plan,
I'm
if
not
that's in the
running.
plans, I gotta start practicing.
Yeah, yeah. Anyways, so let's go to topic number two, and that's going to be the one I'll be writing in tomorrow's article. These are also available on Substack, as I said, at the Sport Marketeer. Yeah, so the topic that I'll be discussing is in regards to short form content. So, short form content is TikTok, Instagram Reels, and YouTube Shorts. I don't think there's another one that I'm missing.
It used to
That's
be Vine, the OG.
fine. OG Vine, correct. Um, so for those of you that don't know, White Whale Marketing over here, follow us on our platforms. We finally got involved with short form content more consistently. I think we posted now 9 days in a row, and it's something we can continue doing because everyone's told me this, and I knew, but I never really put the effort in. But it does actually have a meaningful impact, right? Where whether you're posting consistently on YouTube, Instagram now, it's harder to kind of get that organic growth, right? Rather than spending ads. But by doing reels, I find you're actually targeting people that are, very, interested in the topics you're discussing. And I find that's the best way at the moment to kind of gain a new audience. And with that, right, whether it's my experience in the past or even kind of whether we're looking for clients, partners, or athletes, not many people are on these platforms, and we weren't either. So my question is, why aren't brands, athletes, teams utilizing TikToks and stuff more? Obviously, we do see some doing it, but why aren't all NHL players doing it? Because there's not many.
I think there's the biggest barrier is just I think there's something in the mindset where you don't think of you feel like it's a bigger commitment than it is probably what I should say. And because a lot of the times people expect the best, there's always this strive for professionalism and strive for perfection, I should say, that a
Yeah.
lot of people hesitate to take that first step, which I think, is probably one of the biggest advices that, this probably you would be able to share, Chris. But it's just one of those things where, especially for athletes, right? There's two ways to think about it. Number one, it's, oh, I don't have the time for that, even though, like, A, it's not true because it only takes a matter of minutes. But what they're trying to say is, I don't have the time to make a really good piece of content. And for these types of short form content pieces, it's not about like quality matters, but quantity matters so much more, especially when you consider the algorithm. Like
Yeah.
I've watched a couple of Instagram reels of like, some very obscure topics, right? Like one literally I saw one street food video of a street food vendor in India, and now my Instagram like reels explore all these like Indian street food posts and stuff. I am like on the other side of the planet from India. But after
Yeah.
watching like two or three, Instagram will feed me nothing but that content. And like I'm watching it because it's like, oh, what kind of food are they making here? Like, how are they making samosas in this area of the country or something like that? But the point being is that you don't know where it can take you if one person just starts seeing your reels once, watches the entire thing, because at the end of the day, they don't control the algorithm and you don't control the algorithm. So I think the biggest thing is taking that first step. And the reason why a lot of athletes don't do it is because they're worried about potential consequences of, doing a bad job. Like, I guess they're afraid of, like, ridicule, embarrassment, or just being trolled online. And honestly, I think the truth might also just be a majority of the athletes aren't aware that they can show their personality. And, like, hockey is the biggest example of that, right? Where the, professionalism is key. It's all about the logo on the front and not the name on the back. But when you're not wearing that jersey, no one's seeing a logo on the front. No one even knows the name on the back. You're wearing a helmet so no one sees the face. And then people wonder why they're not popular.
Yeah, no, you're not wrong there. Where even with us, right? That's kind of the whole white whale marketing is it's more than just me, but then to actually create the content and provide the tips, cases, examples, whatever, that would be me, right? And I'm the one that can do it more consistently. And that was one of the things that kind of held us back a bit too. Where I was like, like I don't like being in front of the camera, right? That's why we have this brand to actually help others get in front of the camera, push their brands. So that's definitely a hurdle that's there. And obviously, look, I'll talk from experience here because we're kind of diving into it now. It's not as much of a commitment as you think, but at the beginning, I think there is some slight commitment that just in regards to filming, understanding how to do it, right? So that comes with time. But the best thing I would say for athletes, or even I think there's a decent amount, like obviously like the top teams, they all do it because they have a huge budget. But smaller teams like junior hockey teams, some are doing. I think it's more so if they have like an intern that's young that knows how to do it, or like smaller soccer leagues. Not all the teams are using it because it's not mandated by the league. It's a great way, even for the players, just to like reach out to new audience, as we're saying. You pull in people, and then your Instagram profile is actually what um, you know like verifies you. I say, right? Because it's legitimate, right? Whether because all these athletes have check marks, so you're bringing people to the page. Then you can kind of can still do your feed posts, whether it's you with your dog, you doing outdoor stuff, etc. And then with this newfound following, you can then charge a higher rate for your potential sponsorships, right? So TikTok, it may not seem like there's much there at the moment because you're just doing a bunch of videos every day. You're just trying to get the quantity out. But what that translates to is more people on your pages, on your profiles, which then allows you to sell at a higher rate, right? Because you have that increased following. Sorry, I just lost some words there. But no, it's interesting, and I'll get more in depth. I'm a little better once my words are written out in regards to this stuff. But yeah, check it out, tomorrow's article. And yeah, let's move on to the last topic here. Haral.
Yeah, so recently, if for friends in North America who might be following the soccer scene here, over the past couple of months, there's been a very strong rise, especially north of the border here, in the hype for soccer. And it looks like the MLS, which is Major League Soccer, and the major soccer or football league in the continent is trying to take advantage of that and create their own ecosystem and expand the network of development of future talent. I also don't think it comes as a surprise as this is happening in right before the 2026 World Cup is supposed to be coming to town here. But essentially, to make it short, the MLS obviously has like their top league there. They also have MLS Next, which is their youth academy, which is established just I think just last year, like officially, where there's a league where a bunch of teams would combine their academy, similar to the European model. Now they're introducing something called MLS Next Pro, which is in between the MLS and in between MLS Next. So the way they kind of have it in a chart is that MLS Next is like the youth leagues, similar to when you sign when you're 13 or 14 and develop. MLS Next is when you're not ready for the MLS yet, but there's no age restriction on it. So you don't have to be like, you can't max out at 23 here. If you're above 23 and still need some work, it's like the affiliate league of MLS. Yep, the AHL, the G League, however you want to think about it. It's a development league created for it, which is important for the ecosystem. I think all points aside, we can definitely say that an investment in soccer and in creating more opportunities for players to play and develop into professionals is obviously great for the sport. It's great for the countries involved. It's great for the continent. Where I want to take this topic is this is all very confusing for a lot of people, especially North American fans, because you have MLS, you had MLS Next. Why is this middle one called MLS Next Pro? People are like, I think a lot of people don't know the existence of MLS Next to begin with, because the academy system is very European centric. And for casual fans and the majority of North American audience who are just beginning to get introduced to soccer, they might not even be aware of the academy leagues that exist. So now we're introducing this new product, calling it MLS Next as opposed, or calling it, see, they called it MLS Next Pro when they already have MLS Next. And those are two new, relatively new things that people necessarily haven't heard of. So if all of this sounds confusing, it's because it probably is. And I just wanted to ask, like, did the MLS kind of fumble the bag here by not doing a better job of branding and creating this as a separate entity rather than making it feel like a subset of something that already existed?
Yeah. So, few things to answer there. I think it's a good concept, right? We're not necessarily in the business of, soccer or hockey operations or football operations, but it makes sense, right? Because the more time you give to develop the players, especially North American ones, the better the North American brand of soccer gets, the more high profile players, the bigger the teams, the better the competition. So it is overall good for the business there and marketing opportunities, right? If you have, young American studs coming up through, I don't even know, MLS Next Pro, and then go on to go to these major clubs in Europe, and then perform at the World Cup stage, right? Let's say like 2026. That's huge alone, right? So I think that's a great idea there. As you're saying the names and kind of explaining it, literally as soon as you said MLS Next, I was like, okay, understood. And you said MLS Next Pro, I was like, what a. Sorry if anyone from the MLS is watching. I'm like, what a stupid name. Like that's the first thing I thought of. And what immediately followed that was it's literally like the iPhone is what I thought of.
That's
right?
all I thought of. Yep.
Because I have, I don't even know what iPhone I have now. I have the new iPhone and it's the Pro. And then I went with my aunt to help her go get her phone because she's not good with that stuff. And she got the 13, right? And then when I was at the mobile store, I was kind of asking them, hey, like, wait, what's the difference? And they're like, oh, this one's the 13, this one's the 13 Pro. I'm like, whoa, what's the difference, right? And this is kind of the same thing here. We're like, wait, the next Pro, and it makes sense. I understand it, but then, even though it's a North American product, I still think since it stems from Europe and different things like that, I think you still need to pay somewhat homage to it, in the sense of you can't just the branding of it is too Americanized, right? I think a lot of people that enjoy soccer are more for the culture and the flair that is provided in Europe, right? And that's why you see whether it's like, oh, what's the first team that comes to mind here? Like, there's some crazy teams in the MLS, even Toronto FC, right? A little more local for us. They have some crazy fan sections. You see the smoke bombs or whatever they're called going, the drums, and that has a European environment to it. But then calling things like MLS Next, MLS Next Pro, things like that, rather than calling it like League One or MLS League One, MLS whatever, U23, whatever you want to call it, I think then it's just kind of deteriorating, and people are like, wait, what is this? When I first heard about it, I'm like, oh, is this a TV show? Like, yeah, no, that's my initial thoughts. But
And that's the thing, right? Like, I mean, there's already a couple of leagues that exist. Like the USL exists. There's a couple of leagues that are maybe one or two tiers below the MLS that already exist. So, like, it clearly shows the MLS is trying to make a play to tap into that market while also creating, obviously, an opportunity for talent to develop, which is all great. But like you said, with England, you have the Premier League, and then you have the Premier Championship, or you have like League League Two, or like there's some sort of idea where people understand the progression with it. In baseball, you have AAA, AA, Single A, the big leagues. Even in I guess in hockey and basketball it's a bit different because you have the NHL, the AHL. Like they're two different. Again, they're standalone entities, and then people will eventually make the connections as they begin to understand it. But this whole MLS Next Pro, like you said, it feels very it feels gimmicky. It feels like the iPhone, and so I think the biggest trouble for the MLS is obviously having to compete with the USL and a lot of the other leagues that exist, but B, the biggest question is the point of this league isn't obviously to generate as much revenue or create a commercial product for it, but ideally you want to make all your leagues a commercial product. You want them to be exciting. You want people to attend them. So how is this doing any of that when you're clearly making it, what I would say is a bit more confusing, and it sounds like just something rushed. It's like, oh, we didn't have something for people above 22 that can't play the MLS. All right, perfect. MLS Next Pro, done, signed, sealed, delivered.
the thing with that,
went into it.
sorry about that. the thing with that though is, I was just like looking to verify the names. So the USL, like you're saying, it is a pro league where, pro soccer, you can go from what I think basically as soon as you can properly play well to whenever. So that's essentially the USL. And I know clubs like Toronto FC, like their B team, I think the Whitecaps as well has a B team, and they play in the USL Championship, if I'm not mistaken. I know some teams go in different levels, whether it's like the B or whatever team, or Toronto. They change the names like Toronto FC 2, and then so like Orlando's Magic or Orlando City B. So things like that change up. Essentially, what's kind of sounding like it's the MLS just wants to have the full grasp of it all, right? They want to have their cake and eat it too, right? Where they were partnership, kind of having the USL there, but now they kind of want to have it all in house, which makes it a little difficult. And I guess one of the other perfect examples that's kind of pretty relevant to the branding of this is the USL. I think a few years ago, even their names were a little mixed up as well, and they had to do a rebrand to do something similar to England, where it's Championship, League One, League Two. So that's where people kind of make the connection, right? Where if you're a fan of the EPL, or you're swapping over where you're now an EPL and a North American soccer fan, you can kind of align it well, right? And it's something that we have discussed where, hey, do something different if you're not a major league. Well, there's some things like that where it's more the structure and the foundation. I'd keep those in place so people still have an idea of where they are, right? When they're watching something, they hear, hey, MLS Next Pro, they're going to be like, whoa, what is this? Whereas if you hear like USL League One, USL Championship, okay, I know where I stand because I know, the established leagues in the rest of the world, right?
Yeah, exactly. And obviously you can't call it the MLS Academy, but that would be a great name for MLS Next, right? Just calling it the MLS Academy, short, sweet, and to the point. And then if you had MLS Next as the middle tier, I think that makes sense. That where people understand what the Academy is, they understand what Next is. So it's a bit more like, all right, this is who's next in the MLS, and then MLS Academy is clearly exactly what the Academy would say. It's like a school almost, where the kids are younger, and you get much more of a connection to the idea of the kids not being ready yet. So that's just one way to do it. And I know obviously MLS is trying to use this as a platform to test new rules and try new things to make the game better, similar to how the NBA uses the G League, formerly known as the D League, which is obviously the D stands for development. So again, great ideas fundamentally and conceptually, it's great. Even in fact, one of the teams, I think Rochester, is actually co-owned by Jamie Vardy, who really wanted to invest in a team here, and he wanted to put it into this league. So he's actually been a spokesperson for the team as well, and really excited about it. So it's cool to have that little tidbit in there where Jamie Vardy's a part of this team that's going to be in this league. It's the only team that's not affiliated with an MLS team that's participating in this league, which is also unique and interesting. Again, just the MLS trying to create competition out of it and make it into its own standalone league. I just think it's a great example for a North American sport. Soccer is very unique because it has to compete with the rest of the world, which is not necessarily the case for a lot of the major North American leagues, but it's a good case study in how when you expand into an international market or a sport goes international, sometimes, like you said, you have to pay homage to the traditionalist of it, but you also got to make sure that the local audience is able to understand the product.
Yeah. And to be honest, as you're saying this, one of the things that is coming to mind, I guess the difference with Europe is the relegation factor, right?
Yeah.
And that's why you can kind of have that flow of, to be honest, I'm not going to lie, I don't know what the flow of the USL is. I think you can probably move up and down between them just with the names that they have for the branding of the leagues. And I guess that's the thing where, TFC2, if they win the championship, they're never going to actually go play the MLS, right? So
exactly.
That's the thing where then the same thing where wouldn't you think the Jamie Vardy team, wouldn't he want, if his team performs well, don't you think he'd want to get promoted? It's kind of weird that it's kind of like a one-off team, or it's almost like, hey, you should go to the USL, maybe the winner of the USL becomes the expansion franchise.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I think those ideas those have been interesting ideas, right? Where obviously it's never going to happen just because in North American sports, the concept of relegation is it's so foreign. And I don't think investors, teams like to obviously kind of gamble. It's almost like it is a gamble at that point where you want to make sure the team does well and there's revenue implications and all that stuff. But because that's where your mind went, it clearly is a very interesting product for the fans. And obviously, I don't think it's something the MLS is trying to apply. But if you want to be a competitive sport and you're creating a competitive league, like again, what's the incentive? If it's purely just a developmental league, what's the incentive for people to watch? What's the incentive for Jamie Vardy to have a team there? So it's gonna be interesting to watch to see what like Vardy's intentions are with this team, or what the team's ownership is really just considering as well with this team.
Yeah, and the last point like I'll make too is, I guess, just in regarding like thinking about the audience you're targeting with all this, North American audience and the way they kind of have their fandom. It's less about like look, perfect example here. I'm in Ottawa. I'm a Senators fan right through and through. But as you've seen, all the different like professional leagues for the most part in North America, when teams tend to do poorly, after a few years, then you start seeing how that reflects on the bottom line for the team, whether it's attendance, whether it's merchandise, etc. You're seeing the impacts of the team doing poorly. So then, if you're to factor in relegation in North America, then you're kind of screwed, right? Because then you completely lose that whole franchise almost with the way fandom works in North America. Whereas the way it kind of works, at least just from an outsider's perspective, right, in Europe, it's much more community oriented, I'd say,
Loyalty.
right? Loyalty. Yeah, loyalty to the community, right? It's ingrained into that surrounding area's culture, right? Hey, like whatever happens, we're cheering for your Leeds United, right? And whether they're down or they're up. Yeah, I was gonna make a song reference there, but I won't. Yeah, no, that sounds good. Anyways, that's gonna be it for today's episode. Um, as always, thanks, Haral. Thank you to people who watched, as well as people that will watch in the future, right? When White Whale Marketing blows up, these are going to be the videos people look at first. So if you're there first, congratulations. As always, the Sport Marketeer is the newsletter that we're kind of speaking on, right, with regards to these topics. Yes, check it there. Check it in the link here. You can kind of check it links to our Substack. And from there, you can subscribe, have the newsletter sent to your inbox every Friday. Then you can have all these different sports marketing topics, ideas, and examples sent directly to you. So check it out. Oh, on that note too, I'll start saying this now so it's kind of in people's minds. The Sport Marketeer is the newsletter, and we'll be piggybacking off that and creating a group called the Sport Marketeers. So if you're someone, and I know some people have already reached out on Instagram, if you're someone who wants to be part of a community, a group talking about what's going on in sports marketing, send us a DM at White Whale Marketing on Instagram or Twitter, but mostly Instagram, I'd say. And then we'll be sure to take your name down to add you as one of the founding people of this group. So check it out. Thank you. Enjoy your night, and see you next week.